Welcome to more World of Warplanes content from the Noble Queue. In this video I'm looking at the new Tier 8 Reward and future Premium American bomber, the Douglas XB-42 Mixmaster. Hello there, welcome to this, the second of my videos on the XB-42, and this one's going to be the one with all the numbers, which I couldn't show you previously because, as is becoming customary, the World of Warplanes team made late-breaking changes to the XB-42 just before the event began. The site of the alternative festive season hangar, I think we've had this once before in 2019 maybe, tells you that the event is now ongoing, and I hope that if you're participating you're making satisfactory progress. What I'm going to do first is I'm going to show you the changes that the World of Warplanes team made to the plane. So here we are, here are the changes, and let's go through them one by one. No forward-firing armament, of course, unlike the RB-17, but on the defensive armament, the World of Warplanes team has increased the chance of critical damage being done to enemy planes. They haven't said by how much, and practically, having flown the aircraft a little bit in this new configuration, I can tell you it doesn't seem to make a great deal of difference. At best, you might be able to deter one or two more bots than you used to be able to. So effectively, this plane is still defenseless. On the bombs, the effective explosion radius has gone up from 1.11, whatever that figure means, to 4.89. And I was hoping that that would mean that I'd be able to demount the improved explosives gold consumable and still one-pass mining plants. Unfortunately, that's not the case according to my testing. Without the gold consumable, even with this improvement, I still regularly leave the power plant in the centre with something undestroyed, and that stops me one passing a plant. Having put the improved explosives consumable back on, I can reliably one pass the mining plants again. However, this plane previously had a little bit of a problem with the special object at a command centre. I quite often would leave a little part of that standing after a bombing pass. I suspect very strongly that that will no longer be the case. So the bombing has been made a little bit more reliable, and it was already a strong bomber, but I'm afraid you're probably still going to have to use the improved explosives gold consumable for maximum effectiveness. Hit points, the aircraft has been made more robust. It's been given 200 more hit points, which is good news. That's 300 more than the RB-17. You'll be able to stay in the air a little bit longer. That might keep you in the air long enough to bomb another target, and that extra target that you bomb might be the one that you need to flip a sector. It also encourages me to try a reinforced airframe. Now, I have flown this aircraft with a polished skin for maximum speed, and what I've realised is that even though I've built the plane for speed, I can't get away from pursuers, which means that I still get shot down a lot. Now, I had been hoping that I'd be able to get away from pursuers through superior speed, but there's every reason now to try using the reinforced airframe, which reduces the manoeuvrability of the aircraft, so it might make some bombing runs a little bit more tricky. And see if you can just stay in the air a little bit longer. And I've got that mounted now. What I'll do in the post-build effects section is I'll show you how both builds change the base numbers of this plane. There were also some minor change unannounced. There's a slight increase to the cruise speed here, which I don't think is going to make a lot of difference. Cooldown rate on the engines after boost has been improved. We don't know by how much, but this is good news. I found when flying the plane, particularly towards the ends of sorties, I'd be out of boost, and it became a very pedestrian thing to try to get from one sector to another. So anything that restores the boost quicker is going to be a help. A couple of more minor changes here, minimum optimum speed and maximum optimum speed, tiny increase, don't think you'll notice. The other change, which is useful, is that the maximum glide bombing angle has been increased. Again, we don't know by how much. Now, you will have seen that my method of playing the XB-42 is to glide bomb. I don't do level bombing at height. You can't dive bomb with this plane. So anything that allows you to quickly zigzag through a target, which tends to put the nose down and increase the glide bombing angle, and still keep that angle available for bombing, is a good change. So overall, my assessment is that the bomber has been made a little bit easier to play, but it's still incredibly easy to shoot down. Let's go and have a look at the full numbers in comparison to the other Tier 8 bombers. Here are the statistics for the XB-42 in column C and D, as you can see here, compared to all of the other Tier 8 bombers, each of which has a pair of columns to itself off to the right here. Now, if you don't know what's going on with this spreadsheet, there's a link below in the description to a video that will explain what's going on. Have a look at that and then come back here. As a reminder, the aircraft is in stock configuration here. Ordnance is obviously mounted. Equipment taken off, pilot sent back to the barracks. The modules are all top, and that represents the numbers here. Now, you have seen these figures for the XB-42 in the previous section of the video, but there I didn't update the ratings numbers, some of which have changed. They are correct here. Let's look at the defensive armament first, and you know I've characterised it as effectively leaving this plane defenceless, and the numbers will begin to suggest why. The game says that the defensive armament is one 12.7mm machine gun, or a 50 cal. Clearly wrong, there are two wings. Both of them clearly mount at least one gun each, so I guess it's two, it might even be more. However, the DPS nonetheless is 144, which is worst in class. If you scan your eye across, you'll see that the very worst is the RB-17 at 160 DPS, and that's still better than the XB-42. And there's a compensation on the RB-17, we'll come on to that in a moment. The range of the guns is also worst in class, 2,297 feet, and you can see that's easily worst. So A, the guns do the least DPS, and B, they've got the shortest range, which goes a long way in my opinion to explain why you can't deter anybody with these guns, and you find it hard to even deter bots. And the RB-17, the gun may not seem more pokey, but of course it has got a very good range, so you can start dealing damage to opponents before they can get within range of their guns, and that figure of 3,281 feet can actually be taken out to 4,300 feet with the right equipment. You can try doing the same trick with this defensive armament, but frankly, it's still not going to do the job. You're still not going to be able to deter people. Let's look at the ordnance, and the XB-42 has the second best rating of any Tier 8 bomber at 76. No prizes for guessing which has a higher rating. Yes, it's the B-29C. You didn't see that coming, did you? Cumulative damage of 51,600 is second best in class behind the B-29C, and it's more than 10% damage extra compared to the RB-17, which is pretty significant. Reload time, however, is 50 seconds, which is 10 seconds worse. So swings and roundabouts, but I think I prefer this configuration to the RB-17s, frankly. The quickest reload time is 35 seconds on the Tu-10, but that has a very light bomb load, and you will take at least 2 passes over any sector to flip it with a Tu-10, quite unlike the XB-42, certainly at mining plants. Other sectors, of course, because it's only got 3 sticks of bombs, you will take 2 passes, or you'll drop your 3 sticks and move on to another sector. I do that quite often. Now, we've got 2 figures for damage radius here. A damage radius and an effective explosion radius. Now be careful, I want you to treat these numbers as indicators, because they're pretty certainly in different units. I'm going to work on this in the future because the second of these is a new figure for me. So don't think here that we're perhaps talking about 246 damage radius, but only a 5-foot effective explosion radius. I think this figure needs to be ramped up to be something different. So what do I think these figures mean? I'll explain that in a second, but let's just quickly look at the figures as indicators. 246 damage radius is the same as all of the bombs except the RB-17s, which is 50 feet or so worse, which I think is significant. And then the effective explosion radius, recognising that this is some unit which isn't feet, it's just a number. You can see it's 4.89 for the XB-42, which is actually worse than the other 3 bombers here, RB-17, Tu-10 and Junkers 288C, but considerably better than the 1.11 on the B-29C. And you will know if you play the B-29C that it has an annoying habit of leaving part of a target undamaged. And I reckon this is part of the reason why. It was the case that the XB-42 had a 1.11 figure here as well, so the bombs were quite likely to leave a part of a target undamaged as well, just like the B-29C, and I had particular difficulty reliably destroying the special object at a command centre. I think with this increase, that has gone. You will be able to reliably destroy any target that you bomb. So what's the difference between these two figures? I think the damage radius is the area in which you can do any damage. And at that point, you suddenly realise that if the radius is 50 feet smaller for the RB-17, that's a big area that you can't damage with the RB-17's bombs compared to those for the XB-42. And that might go some way to explain why it's so difficult to destroy a power plant at a mining plant sector with one stick of RB-17 bombs. The damage radius that you have is just not big enough. The effective explosion radius, I think, is, and I'm going to convert this into a figure which is feet when I figure out how to do that conversion, is the area in which you're guaranteed to destroy whatever the bomb hits. Now, it may be smaller than that of the RB-17 and these other two bombers, but in practice, my testing shows that it's fine. It will destroy anything that you bomb, and that wasn't necessarily the case when the bombs only had a 1.11 effective explosion radius. So this is quite a significant improvement that's been made to the plane. And then the dispersion angle is pretty much your accuracy. If you drop the bombs, they're not necessarily going to drop straight down altogether, tightly clustered, one on top of one another. They are going to spread about a little bit. So the higher you bomb, the more likely you are to miss. Not a problem for me. You've seen I glide bomb in the XB-42. I do the same in the RB-17. In fact, glide bombing is my most common method of bombing. If you go high and bomb at height, then you'll find that this dispersion angle will probably mean that you don't destroy everything that you aim your bombs at. As a reminder, everything I've just said about the ordnance is based on the assumption that you will use the improved explosives gold consumable. If you don't, you are likely to leave bits of targets behind because the explosion radiuses are smaller, and you will not most likely be able to one pass a mining plant, which is a significant difference. Survivability, second best in class. What do you think is first? Yes, the B-29C, which is an outlier here, so we won't discuss it. However, this increase to 1800 hit points from the original figure of 1600 takes it to 300 more than the RB-17, and as I've already said, this is going to encourage me with experimenting with a different build. I might take the polished skin off that I have been using in the airframe slot and put on a reinforced airframe, and probably change the pilot skills so that I have protection at expert. So all of that we'll discuss a little bit later in the video. What we need to know here is that that's the second best in class hit points. The damage resistance figures and the fire resistance figures are entirely standard. A little bit worse than the Tu-10 and the Junkers 288C. Oddly enough, quite a lot worse than the B-29C, which depends on being able to stay in the air, fending off aircraft with its defensive armament, whilst being able to use its hit point pool to avoid being destroyed. Airspeed, first in class. I nearly said second, and I was going to say the B-29C, which would have been completely wrong, of course, although the B-29C is actually faster in this game than it ought to be, but that's a different topic for another day. So a rating of 62, which is just more than the RB-17, but I think the RB-17 accelerates quicker, which is useful. Cruise speed 252 is almost the same as the RB-17. Maximum boost speed 488, a bit less than the RB-17, interestingly. The Tu-10 is very quick, as you can see, in cruise, but not very quick under maximum boost speed. And again, fairly similar figures to the Junkers 288C. You'll see later in the video, I use my maximum boost speed to advantage against the Junkers 288C. Manoeuvrability, well, it's enough for you to be able to zigzag purposefully through your sectors and drop your bombs, and with that increased glide bombing angle, available maximum glide bombing angle, you're probably going to be able to do that with the nose dipping and still be able to bomb quite effectively. So the manoeuvrability is fine. Altitude performance, for what it's worth, is best in class on rating. If you bomb from orbit, you are going to miss your targets, but you can, if you wish, get very high indeed, 15,420 feet. And if you play this plane like that, I think you're going to have a pretty unpleasant time. Power to weight ratios, they're the best of the propeller-driven aircraft by some distance, and the aircraft does feel as if it picks up acceleration reasonably quickly. It's hard to compare it with the jets of the RB-17. My feeling is that it doesn't accelerate as fast as the RB-17. But all in all, these are the figures for a capable bomber, albeit one that if an enemy aircraft latches onto it, you're probably going to lose. Okay, time to talk about how to set the aircraft up. Before I talk about setting up the plane, let's have a word about the decoration set. The camouflage is a snake skin camouflage, and I will say that I think the scales are quite nicely done, but overall it's a drab olive green, not very inspiring, and I can't say that I like it very much. If I go and look and see what advantages that confers, well, I can't say I like it very much again, because it's only 5% aircraft experience. And I would suggest that you're better off, unless you don't want to shell out credits and gold, which of course is an important consideration. You get this camouflage for free. You're better off otherwise with the summer paint scheme in the summer slot, and so on for winter, desert and marine schemes. These give you 20% concealment and 10% tolerance to damage from AA guns. The next bonus characteristic isn't that useful unless you, apart from the occasional times you're passing something with a rear gun. Or you can, if you want to economise, use the universal paint scheme. For fewer characteristics, but still useful. 10% concealment, 5% tolerance to damage from AA guns. As far as the nose art is concerned, you get 5% crew experience, usual. And from the emblem, you get 2% crew experience. Again, completely usual. So, unless you want to save money, I would suggest that you change the decoration, certainly the camouflage, to one of the seasonal camouflages or to the universal camouflage. I've opened the service page and put the XB-42 into stock configuration so I can show you the equipment and consumable slots as you would see them when you first get this plane. And I have discovered some more good news that the World of Warplanes team didn't tell me about. They've made changes here as well. What they have done is they have opened a previously locked airframe slot so that all of your equipment slots are immediately available. Very good. Consumables, there were 3 slots locked, and the one that was locked was quite a nuisance. It's the one for the bombs, or outboard weapons as it's called. But it's now unlocked, which means you can immediately mount a consumable to improve the bombs. And of course, I've been advocating that you put on the gold improved explosives consumable, otherwise you won't be able to do some of the things that I've been talking about in this video. You have still got 2 locked slots, one for the engine and one for the turret, but thank you very much, World of Warplanes team. You've made the aircraft better right from the moment that you get it. Now I've popped the XB-42 into specialist configuration, and this is the build that I tested the aircraft with prior to it being released. And of course, I now am thinking that a different build might also work. I'll talk about that a little bit later. So in this build, which is what I might call the speed build, in the cockpit slot, I've got navigational radio equipment. I want this aircraft to go undetected as much as possible, and I want to be able to see enemies as soon as possible so I can avoid them. At all costs, if you can, you want to avoid engagements with this plane until the very last moment when you're actually bombing a sector. So I've got very nearly a 15% improvement in both my concealment and my ability to detect enemies, and the bonus characteristics were selected to improve that further. If we just bring that up quickly, you can see the other characteristics. 2 of them are irrelevant because they improve the accuracy of forward-firing weapons, which we don't have. And then there's tolerance to damage from AA guns, which is, I suppose, a possible choice. So with the speed, the next thing to go for is the polished skin as far as I'm concerned, to improve the cruise speed. It also improves acceleration whilst diving, which won't be very useful to you. You lose a bit of manoeuvrability, as you can see, and I've picked bonus characteristics here, which improve the speed, and then because manoeuvrability is useful if you're zigzagging through a sector, and because it was better than the other characteristics in my opinion, those are the characteristics that I settled upon, but there they are in full for you to have a quick look at. Continuing with the theme of speed, my original thought was that I wanted to be as fast as possible so I could run away from aircraft. Well, experience has now taught me that running away from aircraft is not really feasible. Probably the best you can do is keep them at distance, which is still useful. And to do that, you'd need the high-speed gas turbine and plenty of boost. Now, of course, mounting a high-speed gas turbine means an inevitable loss of boost, but you're starting with 60 seconds. You'll end up losing about 9 seconds if you're careful with your bonus characteristics. So very quickly you can see the boost efficiency, 10% acceleration with boost activated. Well, yes, acceleration will be useful because it picks up speed more quickly and helps keep enemies at bay for longer, and nearly 6% improvement in the maximum speed with boost activated. But as you can see there, 20% of the boost has been lost, and that has been offset by one of the bonus characteristics, the middle one there. I've also got an improved engine cooldown rate, and of course the World of Warplanes team have apparently improved that behind the scenes as well. We can't tell by how much, and the other characteristic improves the speed there. There's the other boost characteristics if you're interested. More cooldown rate might be useful. Acceleration, maybe. Maximum speed with boost, if you're trying to crank as much speed out of this as possible, maybe you choose that one. Okay, so I'm still playing with the turrets in manual mode here. So I've got the ultimate turret gun sight on, and that increases the firing range of a defensive turret when controlled manually. You've got very short range, and maybe 25% improvement seems like a good idea. I'm beginning to come around to the view that it actually isn't that much use, but as you can see, the gunner also is more likely to take injury here. The bonus characteristics have been selected to try and inflict as much critical damage as possible. Doesn't seem to do a great deal, even though the guns apparently have had an increased critical chance. The other bonus characteristics here: aiming speed might be useful. Gunner's resistance to injuries could offset that. That could be useful as well. And another 5% firing range, which on this theory would be a good idea. But I'm bound to say that the other choices of equipment here might be worth considering. The turret armor protection will protect the gunner, and it also reduces the aircraft speed. Probably not. The turret gun laying drive, I think, is a better choice. Aiming speed in automatic mode, a little bit of loss of aircraft maneuverability. But here, if you're going to mount the turret gun laying drive, you're probably going to say to yourself, I'm just going to leave the turret in automatic mode, and I'm going to do what I can to fly as fast as possible and be evasive, but I'll leave the guns to shift for themselves. And I think that's a pretty valid argument, actually, given the guns are so weak. So I've still got the turret gun sight on, but if I were to change it, turret gun laying drive. As for the outboard weapon, choices here: bomb sight for increased accuracy. I don't think that's necessary, particularly if you do what I do, which is glide bomb. If you like being up in orbit, then actually this becomes a pretty important piece of equipment, because that dispersion on the bombs will cause you to miss your targets. I really don't recommend that you go up in orbit, but if you want to, you can. Then you might want the bomb sight. Rocket sight, clearly useless. There are no rockets on the plane. Aerodynamic pylons for more speed. Yes, if you're wanting to try and increase the speed of the aircraft, get it between sectors more quickly, and you don't mind increasing your reload time. I found that increasing the reload time caused me to be twiddling my thumbs, waiting for the bombs to come back when I arrived at a sector. That is not good, because whilst you're doing nothing and you're vulnerable, you may find that you get pounced upon before you can do anything useful. So the aerodynamic pylons were not for me. Strengthened hardpoints, therefore, was my choice, and you can see the improvements there. 21% improvement in bomb reload speed. Now, in my previous video, I said that brings the reload speed down to 36 seconds from 50 seconds, and you can get it less with experimental equipment. Silly me, there isn't experimental equipment for the strengthened hardpoint, so this is it. This is all you can do. That comes at a cost of reducing the aircraft speed, which I've compensated for with the other equipment. Bonus characteristics improve the bomb reload speed and both the cruise speed and the maximum speed with boost. Other characteristics: you could improve the bombing accuracy. The other two refer to rockets, which are irrelevant here. And if we just look over here very quickly, and I'll show you this in the post-build effects in more detail, but you can see there it says that the reload speed has come down to 36 seconds, which is pretty nice. Pilot skills with this one, and I'm going to do pilot skills in this section and roll it into the equipment section as well on this occasion. Let's just bring that dialog box up. Pretty much if you want to improve speed, equipment, aerodynamics expert, straight away, engine guru 1 and engine guru 2, these seem like obvious choices to me. Demolition expert is important for the bombs, increases the damage and their blast radius, which is really important, by 10%. And then you've got 2 points floating here, and I think probably I would put them on cruise flight with this configuration, just to get about between sectors more quickly and also improve my view range. If I had another point, I suppose resilience might be a good choice as well, just to help the aircraft survive a bit longer. And if we go for an alternative build, one where we're increasing the hit points of the aircraft, which we'll talk about shortly, this would be an even better choice. But that's quite a few points there already. I think that's a good indication of what you would do with your pilot under this sort of build. For the gunner, well, the gunner's not that valuable, but I have a fairly standard path here. We've gone for defensive fire and precision gunner first. We had a skill point which we've earned during testing, so I've put it on vigilance rather, to improve the ability of the aircraft to spot enemies. And we probably still will follow the normal route here. We have the turret aiming quick reflexes skill here, but then as soon as we manage to work up to 5 points, we probably go through ballistics expert, armor and ballistics expert to increase the range again. And that would be true of any build. So that's the gunner done. That's what I would recommend that you do with a gunner. Okay, so that's a speed build. Let's go and talk about a resilience build. Here I'm going to talk about what I might call a resilience build, and the difference between this one and the previous one is that I've taken the polished skin off and mounted a reinforced airframe, and because that causes me to lose cruise speed, which is not a great idea in my opinion, I've mounted an uprated engine for better cruise speed instead of the high-speed gas turbine. I'll talk about the pros and cons of that in a moment or two. But just a thought here, how I wish we didn't have this slot on the turret, because the turrets are nearly useless, and it was instead on the engine. Now, funnily enough, the RB-17 has a different configuration to the XB-42. It does have 2 engine slots, and therefore you can do things like mount an uprated engine, but alongside cockpit armour, so that your engines don't get knocked out a lot. And the reason I mention that is because the engine here is at the back and it does get knocked out a lot, but there isn't a great deal you can do about that if you want to increase the speed of the aircraft. You're limited to one choice here. It's either or. It's either speed or protecting the engine, and I opt for speed. So the reinforced airframe gives 20% extra aircraft hit points at the loss to 15% maneuverability, which I don't think is a big issue. And then the bonus characteristics. First one's important. ADAs and enemy aircraft have a habit of knocking out your tail when you're in the middle of a zigzagging run in a sector, and basically saying to you, you're not going to bomb the targets you want to bomb, because now you're more or less constrained to go in a straight line. So it's irritating when that happens, so you can improve the resistance of the tail to that kind of problem. Tolerance to damage from AA guns, 10%, and another 3% aircraft HP. In view of the fact that I've got an uprated engine, I actually think the first characteristic here, which I haven't mounted, 10% resistance to fire, would be a good choice, and drop the tolerance to damage from the AA guns. Wings resistance to critical damage, that's not so important as protecting the tail, and roll maneuverability you don't need. On the uprated engine, we've got a 10% acceleration without boost improvement, which is okay, and 6% or thereabouts extra cruise speed. At a terrible cost of 33% extra chance of fire. You've lost 33% of your resistance. I've compensated for that with 10% resistance to fire in the bonus characteristics, and then the next two improve the speed a little. Other bonus characteristics there, you could actually improve the boost speed, you can improve the acceleration. Engine cooldown rate, another 5%. That would be pretty good. The World of Warplanes team have improved it in the background. Another 5% would just add to that as well. If we look at the survivability figure, we can see that the resistance to fire has come down to 44. That's a little bit low for a bomber, and it might cause you to start thinking about taking other measures to protect yourself from the effects of fire, some of which could be done with pilot skills. Let's talk about that now. I still think that you're going to want to pick Aerodynamics Expert to keep the speed of the aircraft up. Engine Guru 1 and Engine Guru 2, same principle. Demolition Expert to get that extra blast radius and extra damage off the bombs. And then, what would I do? I would probably pick Protection Expert, because you've got the reinforced airframe, and this will improve the aircraft durability and resistance to critical damage by 40%. If you're really worried about fire, you could pick off the fire resistance skill and the fire, well, maybe not the firefighter skill. Yeah, you can fling the aircraft about and you might be able to get this to activate. I suspect you probably wouldn't. So maybe more likely fire resistance and then eagle-eyed with these extra 2 points. But I would go for Protection Expert. If I pop a high-speed gas turbine on, let's do that now. Before we do that, actually, let's open up the airspeed figures. Just keep your eyes over here as I mount the equipment. There we go. You can see the rating's actually gone down by 2 because the game values cruise speed higher than boost speed. Your boost speed has gone up to 521, but your cruise speed is now down at 250, and that's why I fought shy of doing it this way round. It's worth considering, but it just feels like the aircraft is going to be awfully slow, and you're going to be using an awful lot of boost to try and get it around sectors, and then you're going to run into that problem I mentioned earlier about not having boost towards the end of sorties and really just floating around. And once you are slow, you are a much easier target for the enemies. So I think I'm inclined for the uprated engine here. Okay, let's reset here. Let's just quickly talk about consumables. 2 aircrew, losing either of them is bad, so unsurprisingly pick the first aid dressing package here. If you're going to go with an uprated engine, you might incline towards the fire extinguisher and just bear the consequences of losing your crew member. It's up to you. I've mentioned that you lose the engine a lot, and I wish I could mount the engine armour protection, but I can't if I want to improve the speed of the aircraft. Therefore, we've got the restart bottle here. And then for more speed, I've got an improved mixture control. I don't think engine cooling is that suitable here, that useful here, because although it does effectively give you 10%, 10 extra seconds of boost when you're boosting, and replenishes boost up to 12 or 13 seconds quite quickly if you're not boosting. You're starting off with a fair amount of boost, and I prefer to control that by not overusing my boost than by having the engine cooling available, and this gives me extra thrust and extra speed, cruise speed. Turret, universal ammunition. If it was a strong turret, you might consider gold, but I think that'd be a waste on this aircraft. Don't think it's going to do much for you. However, when it comes to the improved explosives, just for once, I'm going to strongly recommend, if you possibly can, that you mount the improved explosives, the gold consumable, because if you don't, you are going to hamper this plane's bombing effectiveness quite considerably. However, if you haven't got gold and you're a completely free-to-play player, then of course you'll have to put on improved fragmentation. Right, so those are the 2 builds. Let's go and have a look at some post-build effects. Here we have a spreadsheet showing the effects of my choices, equipment, consumables, pilot skills, and so on the base figures of the aircraft, which are shown in columns C and D, mostly limited to ones that are changed. The first build, the speed build, is shown in columns E and F, and the difference between the two is shown in columns G and H. G has it in absolute terms, H in percentage terms. As a reminder, we have navigational radio equipment, polished skin, high-speed gas turbine, turret gun sight, strengthened hardpoints, all ultimate level, fully calibrated. On the rear guns, we have an improvement in range of 25%. Sounds healthy. Unfortunately, it's only in manual mode, and even in manual mode, that's not enough, because you won't start doing damage to aircraft until they're nearly coming into range of their own weapons. You ideally want to be doing damage to them before they can get anywhere near shooting you. And in automatic mode, it's even worse, because they can get to 2,300 feet. They'll be shooting you by that time, in most cases. We've also got a 75% increased chance of inflicting criticals. Well, be that as it may, the plane doesn't do enough criticals to deter anything except the occasional ADA or bot. We've also got a 10% improvement in the aiming speed, but again, only in manual mode. And the lesson here is you can try and use the guns in manual mode and they're not good enough. And you can try and leave them in automatic mode and they're even worse. Ordnance rating has gone up to 117. We now have 62,500 or thereabouts worth of damage, 21% improvement on the bombs. I calculate the resupply time is 34.5 seconds. The UI says 36. It's around 15 seconds either way, around a 30% improvement. Damage radius has gone up by 40% to 344 feet. I assume the effective explosion radius has also gone up. Part of this is coming from the improved explosives gold consumable. And as I've explained earlier in the video, that seems to be the tipping point as to whether you can fully destroy a power plant with 1 stick of bombs at a mining plant or you can't. On survivability, we've got a minor difference here. I don't know where we've lost a point of damage resistance from, but apparently we have. We've also got some other improvements here, and also some drawbacks. We've got a 30% improvement in concealment. We've got 12% more likelihood of injury to the pilot, and a 17% increased likelihood of injury to the gunner. Airspeed rating's gone up to 64. That's a couple of points of improvement. 37 miles an hour on the cruise speed, 39 miles an hour on the boost maximum speed. That comes at a cost of 9 seconds of boost, unfortunately. We've also got some good improvements in acceleration here, 3 of them, as you can see. We've also got an improvement in the engine cooldown rate of 10%. Maneuverability, seem to have taken that away. Let's just type that in again. We've lost a tiny amount of maneuverability. The turn time has gone up to 0.64 seconds. Probably not going to notice that. We've also lost 3.8% of yaw maneuverability. And we've got a fairly nice improvement in the climb rate. Not that that makes much difference to by 119 feet. If you happen to get too low and you need to pull up quickly, I suppose you'll benefit from that. And that rating should be different. I'm going to put it in as 77, but it'll be more than that. It'll be something like 79 or so. I'm using a particular consumable that I want to draw your attention to, which is improved mixture control, more thrust, more cruise speed. Pilot skills, aerodynamics expert, engine guru 1 and 2, demolition expert for the bombs, cruise flight for swifter progression between sectors, and also improved capability in terms of detecting things. And the gunner has defensive fire, precision gunner, and vigilance. So the next build, which was the resilience build, really a hybrid build between speed and resilience, that's in columns I and J, and the differences are in columns K and L. And what we've done here is we've substituted in a reinforced airframe and an uprated engine, again ultimate level, fully calibrated for the polished skin and the high-speed gas turbine. Guns and ordnance are the same, so we'll skip over that. Survivability has changed. The rating is now 58, and that's because we've got the hit points up over 2400. I calculate 2418. The game says 2401. Either way, it's more than 600 points of improvement, around about 34%. We've lost that damage point resistance point again, but more importantly, because I'm using an uprated engine, we've lost around 14 seconds, I calculate, of fire resistance. I say 14 seconds, I mean 14 points of fire resistance. The game says 44, so it's even worse, and this is coming to the sort of region where you would want to take measures against it, such as using pilot skills, which I really regret, or maybe a fire extinguisher, which is a pain if you get your crew injured. Other-ish items for survivability, that 30% concealment again. We've got that 14% improvement in the tail's resistance to damage, which is quite important, because if you're zigzagging in a sector trying to bomb and your tail's shot off, that's really inconvenient. 10% AA damage tolerance here, and again we've got those injury negatives on the pilot and the gunner, same as last time. Airspeed rating is 62 still, and the cruise speed has gone up by 24 miles an hour, and that's the difference between dropping the polished skin and putting on an uprated engine. And the boost maximum speed has dropped by 14 miles an hour to 474. That's a bit of a nuisance, really. Now, if you drop in a high-speed gas turbine instead of the uprated engine, you get some different effects. First off, on the survivability, you can avoid bringing the fire resistance figure down, and also you can get speeds of around 250 miles an hour for cruise and 521 miles an hour for boost, with a loss of 9 seconds of boost, unfortunately, if you use that high-speed gas turbine instead of the uprated engine. I don't like how low this speed is, especially if you run out of boost towards the end of a sortie. You're going to be a sitting duck, basically. But really, this ought to be tested to see whether it's a better configuration than the uprated engine. Do try it if you fancy it. Maneuverability, again, we lost a ratings point for a different reason this time. The roll rate's been reduced by 6 degrees per second. I don't think there are any other effects. There aren't. We've still got an improvement in the climb rate, only by 38 feet per second this time to 329. So don't get too low, because you're not going to be able to pull up as fast. Still got the same consumable, improved mixture control. Pilot, this time the skills are slightly different. The gunner's the same, so we won't repeat that, but the pilot has got aerodynamics expert, engine guru 1 and 2, they're the same. Demolition expert, that's the same, but now it's got protection expert to try and help with these hit points. So there you go. That's a visual indication of the improvements that you can make using those sorts of build. Hope you found that helpful. There you have it, the numbers video. There's no performance evaluation because the changes to the aircraft demand that I retest it, probably for both the builds I've shown you, maybe others, and I haven't had time to do that. Besides which, trying to test a plane during the Holiday Manoeuvres event, where players have goals other than winning games, is likely to be misleading. Also, I mentioned earlier in the video that you'd see me using my speed against a Junkers 288C bomber, but I decided to cut the footage of that battle as I didn't think it added anything to the battle footage I presented in my previous video, a link to which is in the description below. So, let me offer some final remarks. There's no doubt in my mind the World of Warplanes team has improved the plane with the changes made as it was released into the game. It's likely to be an even more reliable bomber than it already was, and if you're prepared to use the gold improved explosives consumable, it's significantly differentiated from the RB-17 by being able to one-pass mining plants on most occasions, something the RB-17 struggles to do. However, it remains relatively defenceless, and the key point of future testing, for me, will be if a speed build is still the best option or if the hybrid speed reinforcement build is now viable, given the ability to add 600 or more hit points to the airframe on top of the extra 200 the World of Warplanes team gave it. On the NA server, where the competition from other players is less, I can see this bomber replacing the RB-17. On the EU server, where there are more players prepared to attack and destroy bombers, the lack of defensive potency may tell against the XB-42 sufficiently for the RB-17 to remain the preference. Time will tell. Well, I hope you found that useful, and that, if you did, you'll come and see my future content. Until then, this is the Noble Q, signing off.